Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon from Los Angeles, where it is sunny and warm. I hope you are having lovely weather wherever you happen to be today. And today, our topic for the live stream is manual testing. So, if you start working on the accessibility, you will probably come across the information at some point that not all accessibility issues can be found by an automated scanner. And that is true. And it doesn't matter which automated scanner you happen to be using. There's a whole bunch of them that are available to you as browser add-ons, as standalone tools, to be integrated into your CI/CD pipeline if you're a developer, desktop applications, right? There's many different automated scanners available. And the thing about it is that automated testing is amazing. It's so helpful, um, can save you a ton of time finding a bunch of issues that you would otherwise have to find manually. However, it is limited, and you will definitely come across that information. So, um, there doesn't seem to be a really firm agreement on exactly how many accessibility issues can be found by an automated scanner. Um, but you'll generally see estimates in the range of 20 to 30%. And I want to clarify that number because that does not mean that if you have, for example, 100 accessibility issues on your homepage, that an automated scanner would find 20 or 30 of those issues. So that is not what that number means. What that number means is that of all the types of accessibility issues that could possibly exist, only 20 to 30% of those can be found using an automated tool. So as an example, an automated tool can check to see if a background and a foreground color are set in CSS. An automated checker can check to make sure that there is sufficient contrast between the text and the background. Once you start using opacity, absolute positioning, text shadows, background images or background gradients, once you start using any of those things, the automated checker can no longer tell for sure that contrast is good or not. So now we're into an area where we need manual checking. An automated tool can check, for example, if an image has alt text on it. An automated tool cannot check to make sure that that alt text is relevant and appropriate for the image. Maybe AI tools will get there someday, but right now that's an example of something that would require a manual check. Something that can never be checked with an automated tool, for example, is does something work with just the keyboard? So if I've got some kind of custom component or custom feature that I've built on my site, I can't really tell, but just by running an automated scan on the site, if that is going to work with keyboard alone, that is a type of accessibility issue that's going to require that gets tested manually to confirm if there's an issue there or not. So that's what we mean when we say automated tools can only find 20 to 30% of the types of accessibility issues that are out there. On any one particular site, it really depends on what features you're using, how the site is coded. And it's entirely possible that for a particular site, it would be 100% of the issues, right? If all of the issues that you had happened to be the ones that could be found with an automated checker, it's possible. It's not very likely. So I wouldn't put too much stock in that. You would definitely want to do some manual testing to confirm that. But generally on most sites, it's going to be, somewhere between a quarter to a third of accessibility issues that could be found on the site using an automated checker. And exactly what that number is going to vary from site to site. So manual testing is definitely something important that needs to be done. And it can sound a little bit intimidating. So if I say, oh, you have to do some manual testing on this website, maybe you don't really understand what that means. Like maybe you don't really understand where to get started. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about some easy ways that you can get started with manual testing. And we're going to look at some evaluation methodology for doing a full audit. We're not going to do that today because that would take way longer than 1 hour. But I am going to show you kind of some ideas so that you could kind of get started learning about that and get started figuring out how you would plan out an audit and execute a full audit on an application or a website. All right, so I'm sharing on the screen right now the Aardvark homepage. We'll do a few tests on this page because it's always good to just double check your own work and make sure that it is accessible and that everything is working as expected. No website or web application is ever going to be perfectly accessible or 100% accessible. So that just doesn't exist. So that's not a realistic goal. So what we want to do is just always be testing, always be checking, always finding barriers and removing them wherever we can find them. So things can be more or less accessible, but nothing is ever going to be perfectly accessible. All right, so I'm going to quickly walk through some of the sites we'll use for testing today. So we have the Aardvark homepage here. It's been up for a little while on the screen. We'll do some testing on this page. We did just launch this, a new homepage a couple weeks ago, so it's a good time to go through and just do a quick check, make sure that we didn't introduce any new issues onto the site, make sure everything is good. We did, of course, do that as part of the design and development process for the new page. But always good to do another check because, we've made a few little changes and adjustments since it launched. So we just want to make sure that we didn't accidentally introduce anything. All right, another site that we'll be taking a look at a little bit today is this site here, Discover Mercury, which is available online at discovermercury.site. This is an AI generated site. So I just went to, I used DeepSeek for this one. And I just went into DeepSeek and I said, hey, I want a website that is about travel packages to the planet Mercury. And, it didn't even question me. It just went with it. It didn't point out that that's probably not a very good idea and just generated this site. And you can tell right away that it has some animations happening on here that we cannot pause or remove from the page. So that's definitely an accessibility issue. I do have on my computer, the prefers reduced motion setting is turned on, but this site, like so many across the internet, does not respect that setting. It's been truly surprising to me since I turned that option off, how few websites respect that setting. So that's, if you don't know about that, you can check for that setting in both JavaScript and there is a media query for it in CSS. So like an example like these where we see the picture of the planet is kind of animated going up and down. We see also the buttons are kind of pulsing, right? This button here and this button up here are kind of pulsing. So those are just CSS animations. So that could have all been stopped with just a media query in the CSS to say only apply these animations if the user does not have prefers reduced motion on. But that's not what happened here. There's a variety of other accessibility issues on the site, maybe as expected. I did not specifically tell the AI to generate an accessible site, but I shouldn't have had to do that, right? It should have been the default setting. But we'll take a look at some of the accessibility issues on this site as well. And then I also have this site for Discover Venus, which is again online at discovervenus.site. And this one was not AI generated. This one was built by hand, but built manually, and it was built purposefully to have a bunch of accessibility issues on it. So we'll be using that one for some of our tests today as well. So if we're just getting started with manual testing, The WAI actually has this really nice document and methodology available called Easy Checks, which is going to walk you through some manual tests for some really common issues that are on your page. So going through the Easy Checks is not a comprehensive audit. It is not going to find every possible accessibility issue that's on your site. However, it is going to find a lot of the really common issues and will also get you started in how to do manual testing. So I have walked through this document on live streams before, but I walked through, let's see. Okay, yeah, there's two versions of the document. So this version of the document is the old version, and it is quite old. There's somewhere that you can look at the versions. This version is 10 years old. It still works. You can still step through it. And the replacement document you can see here is still in draft mode. So this is the new version of Easy Checks, and it's a little bit more comprehensive. It has a few more tests in it than the old version does. It is still technically in draft mode, but I think we're going to give it a try today and kind of see how it goes. So we'll be stepping through this document to just step through. It gives you kind of one by one some different areas of the site to test, and it will tell us how to go about testing all of these things on our page. And then a little bit later on, I think before we wrap up for the day, we will not get through this whole document in the hour. So just FYI. But it is available online if you just do a web search for WCAG Easy Checks. One of the versions of this document, either the old document or the draft version of the new document, will come up in the search results, and you can go check it out for yourself. If you run into any questions on that, leave a comment on this video if you start working through that on your own, and I'll do my best to get those questions answered. Anyway, I wanted to wrap up at the end of the video by just touching on really quickly WCAG EM, which is the evaluation methodology for WCAG, which it actually sets out a methodology for conducting a complete accessibility audit. So I just wanted to talk about that for a minute at the end of the stream today. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with these Easy Checks. We'll use the draft version of the new document, and I've never tried it before. So here we are trying something new together. So you can follow along with me. Now, I wonder, does this just take me further down the document? No. Okay. So the original document is a single page, and the links just kind of jump you up and down the page. It looks like this one is actually separate pages for each of these different areas. So that'll actually make it a little bit easier to navigate around. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to check is image alternative text, and it explains to us, what does that mean? Why is that important? And how do we check it? So we have some check images on this page. So there's a nice little tool kind of built right into this page that will show us the alt text. So here on this image, alt text is Golden Lab, and on this one, this image is missing alt text. So we see it got a red border if you're able to perceive colors. It looks like that's supposed to be green or maybe blue. I'm not actually sure about the border color on that one. Maybe teal, somewhere between blue and green. All right. Okay, so it has us using a bookmarklet. So that's pretty fun. So to check images on other pages, you would use the check images link as a bookmark. So presumably it is this bookmarklet that we just used here. So we can just drag this to our bookmark bar, go to the page that we want to check, and click on the check images link in our bookmarks. All right, so bookmark this link, check images, bookmarklet. And one thing, let me take a step back here and explain what a bookmarklet is. A bookmarklet is just a little bit of JavaScript that you can run on a page by saving it as a bookmark. So you save it in your browser, just like you would if you found a page that you really liked and you wanted to save it to come back to it later. So you save it that same way, but it's not actually a page. It's not actually a URL that you're visiting in the browser. It's actually just a snippet of JavaScript. Some of them are very simple. This one looks very simple. It's just going to highlight images and tell me if they have alt text or not. Some of them are actually very complex. They're almost like a whole app contained in a JavaScript bookmarklet. I think bookmarks menu. That's okay. We'll put it in the toolbar. So one disadvantage that I have found with bookmarklets is that once you have bookmarked them and once you have saved them to your browser, it is really difficult to tell where those came from. So I do think it is helpful to put a little note, and you don't get a lot of information in your browser. You can change the name of it or you can add some tags, but I think it is helpful to just put something in here for yourself so that you'll know where this came from. So I'm just going to put a tag on this one for WCAG Easy Checks so that I remember that it came from this page. When I see this later and I say, what is this bookmarklet? Where did it come from? I will at least know that it came from these easy checks. So let me go ahead and save that. And then I have to show my bookmark toolbar. Okay. And then if we head over here, so there's my bookmarklet that I just saved. So let's go over to this page here and we will just click that bookmarklet. And we can see now that it highlighted, I'm sorry, I still can't tell if that's green or blue. It's teal, I guess. So it highlighted this one and gave me that link alt text is Discover Venus. Is that suitable? All right. Oh, do I have to click it again? Okay. It gave me this one. Alt text is empty. So I have to decide now, right? This is where an automated tool can't really help us. So an automated tool could have flagged like, hey, there's an image here that doesn't have alt text, but it can't really tell us, is this a decorative image that doesn't need alt text, or is this an image that probably should have alt text? It looks to me like this is one that probably should have alt text. Because presumably, this is a page about the planet Venus, and presumably this is, I know this is not actually a picture of the planet Venus, right? But for the sake of this site, we're pretending that this is one of the travel destinations that you could get to on planet Venus. And because of that context, I think it probably should have alt text in this image. So this one doesn't have alt text, and that I actually think is true. That is just a decorative image, right? It's just a little divider there to visually separate one section from another. It doesn't really have any relevance on the page. It's not communicating any kind of information. It's not showing me anything. So I think it is appropriate that that one has empty alt text. And you can see that it has flagged every image on the page. So I can go down through and make sure, do all the images have alt text? If they are missing alt text, is that appropriate? Is the alt text that they have on them actually correct and appropriate? So it looks like there's only one image on the page that has alt text, which is this one up here. Now, you probably notice that there are other images on the page. For example, this big image here, but it's a background image. So separately, we would want to check, hey, is that background image actually decorative, or is it communicating some kind of information? So the text that's here is actually live text that's positioned on top of the image. It's not part of the image itself. So in that case, this one could maybe be just considered a decorative image. And then we also had another section down here with a big background image, right, that has some text positioned on top of it. So the same decision we have to make here. Is this just a decorative image, and therefore is it okay that it's just a background image with no additional alt text, right, and nothing available for screen reader users to understand what's happening in that image? So that's a decision that we have to make. All right, and it will walk us through. So it tells us how to check other pages. And it tells me also what I'm looking for, right? So it'll tell me there's an image missing alt text. It'll tell me that the alt text is set to empty, which this is the correct way of marking up an image that is merely decorative on the page. You don't want to just completely leave the all attribute off. You want to have the all attribute there, but have it set to nothing, right? So equals quote, quote. So it's just an empty string for the alt text. And that is the flag to assistive technology, that is a decorative image that assistive technology can ignore. When we just completely leave off the all attribute, that is an error. So you should always have the all attribute, and whether or not it has a value just depends on if it's a decorative image or not. Okay, so that is our image, our test for images, and there is this handy navigation at the bottom that will take me to the next test, which is checking the page title. And again, it's going to tell me, explain to me what a page title is, right? So it is the text that appears up on the tab of the browser. So that's one place that we see it. It is also the first text that gets announced to a screen reader user when they land on a page to let them know where they are. So for a page title, we want to make sure that it is actually descriptive of what the page is about that we're on. We also want to make sure that it's unique for each page of a site. So you don't want to just have, right, on my Discover Venus site, it happens to only be one page. But if this were a multi-page site, I wouldn't just want Discover Venus to be the title of each page, because now I can't tell which page I'm on, right? Am I on the contact page? Am I on the About Us page? Am I on the booking page? You know, I can't tell from the page title alone which page I'm on. So the page title needs to describe the page we're on, and then it also needs to be unique for each page of a site. So this is going to walk us through, like, what is a page title? Why is it important? And then how to check it. And it looks like we've got another bookmarklet. So we'll try it here. Check the page title on this page, and it opens this little modal that tells me the page title. You do notice that on the browser tabs, right, it gets cut off. Unless your page title is very short, it's probably going to get cut off and not be visible on that tab. Now, you can usually hover over the tab in most browsers to see the full title. I can't move my mouse down over to what just opened up because it will go away as soon as I move off of the tab. But you can actually see the full title of the of each page if you hover over the tab name. But this also gives you a quick way to just see it right here in front of you. And now we can see, is this the correct page? So it does tell us that we are on page title of Easy Checks of the Web Accessibility Initiative, which is on the W3C site. So that's a pretty nice description of where we are. We are on the page that's checking the page titles. We are in the middle of doing the WCAG Easy Checks. That is offered to us by the Web Accessibility Initiative, which is part of the W3C. So very descriptive title that tells me exactly where I am and every level of organization that happens to be involved there. So again, if we want to check that on other pages, we would just want to check mark this. We just want to bookmark this bookmarklet here. Sorry, I forgot what it was called. Check page title. You can edit that if you want it to be something else. So I'll save it. We'll see it show up here. And let's try the Discover Mercury site this time. And we'll just click that, check page title. And it will show us here the full page title. And again, an automated checker could tell me if there's a page title there or not, but it's not going to be able to tell me, is the page title appropriate? Is it the right page title for this page? So that's something that we have to check manually. So I think for this one, that looks great. I don't see any problem with that. And it will walk you through here what to look for, give you some extra tips about what you should be looking for, and link you off to where you can learn some more information. All right, let's go ahead and jump over, just checking on how we're doing on time. All right, let's check headings. This is one of my favorites to check. All right, so If you are newer to maybe editing a blog or doing content editing on a site, a very common misconception is that when you mark things as H1, H2, H3, etc., that all you're doing is making that text large and bold. So you're making that text stand out. So it's just a style choice, basically, because it's not actually made clear in most editing tools that headings actually have a meaning to them. So they do actually impart meaning to the content that's inside of those tags. And we call that semantic. So they are semantic tags. They give meaning. An H1, for example, tells me that that is a level 1 heading. And usually that is the main idea of a page. So we can see that here. It's showing us an example of, it looks like this very page actually, and how the heading structure is set up. So I have one H1, which is usually the best practice. That is this heading here. That is the main idea of this page. And chances are that that heading is going to match the page title or be very closely related to it, right? We wouldn't put all of the additional web accessibility initiative, W3C, etc. We wouldn't normally print that out on a page. That's okay in the page title, but we wouldn't necessarily want that in the H1. So the H1 is usually pretty similar to the page title. And then we have the sections of the page that each get headed up by an H2. And then if we have subsections inside of each of those sections, those get headed up by an H3. And that is how our page should be constructed. Now, on a page like this, that is just straight information, we're just going to, it's very linear, top to bottom. We're just going to scroll down the page. Here's my H1, here's my H2, more H2s. And then this is the section that has the subsections. So these are H3s. That's very easy and straightforward to understand, and it makes a lot of sense. When we're looking at a page like this, that's maybe not so linear, that has different sections that are laid out in different ways, that has content that's in different, let me close this bookmarklet. We don't need that anymore. That has content that's in columns, right? That has things like this, where we have a grid of items. We have this section, which actually seems to go horizontally across. So sometimes, just because of the design, it's not super straightforward exactly what the heading structure should be, the same way it is in a more simple, very text-based document like this one. So let's go through and do some quick tests, and maybe we'll check both the Mercury and the Venus site for the headings. So again, it's going to explain to us, what is this? Why is it important? And then it's going to walk us through how to check it. I just want to touch on why it's important really quickly. So it is important for screen readers. Screen reader users can navigate by headings. So if they just wanted to, land on a page and say, gosh, what are all the sections of content on this page? They could just go, show me all the H2s, or read to me all the H2s, right? Like read those out to me so that I can understand what all of those are. And we do see a little screenshot over here of, I think this might be JAWS, but of a screen reader UI that is telling us that we're seeing a heading list, and then I can have the option to see all the headings or just the level 1, level 2, etc. So that is really helpful. It's also helpful for people, for just anybody, honestly, who's trying to understand a document and how it's set up and how the different sections of content relate to one another. So having that be made really clear is really helpful. So it looks like here again, we have another little bookmarklet. So let me go ahead and click it for this page. All right. And it's going to open up this little dialog here. And we see that exact same structure that we saw at the top of the page, except I do notice that we have an H4 hanging out in here that wasn't included in the sample. So here's what our structure looks like. So that all looks good. Let me go ahead and save this bookmarklet. So let's go ahead and bookmark that. And I'm just going to flag that as easy check so I remember where it came from. Let's go over to Discover Venus and check the headings. All right. So we can see right away, we don't have an H1 on this page. So we don't have a heading that's showing us this is the main idea of this page. So that is missing. Then we have, let's see, we have our best offer, which is this, looks like this whole bit of text here is all together as one H2. So let's take a look here. Then we have make a reservation, which is this H2, which does start another section. So it seems appropriate. All right. And then after, can I click these? Oh, good. Okay. I can click those to jump around to them. So here we have another H2, which I think is fair. That's another section of the page. Top destinations. Yes, that's another section of the page. And then under that, I have this grid of destinations on planet Venus, which of course, these are not actually pictures of destinations on Venus. They're just pretty pictures. All right. And so I can see that each of those is an H3. And I don't think that's actually correct, semantically correct. The reason that I don't think that that's correct is that that's not actually a subsection of content, right? There's not a paragraph like here. If we look at Beta Regio, for example, there's not a paragraph of text about Beta Regio. Like there's not some additional information. Just the next thing on the page is just the next H3. So I don't think that those are actually correctly marked up as headings, and I would probably recommend that the developer come back through and make those just paragraph tags. They can still be styled to be large and bold the way that they are now, but they should probably not be headings. All right, let's take a look at what we have next. So we have an H2 for a section called packages, which does look like another section on the page. So I think the H2 is appropriate. And then we have 3 subsections under there for mountains. So these over here are our subsections, so mountains, volcanoes, and plains. And that actually looks fine because we do have additional content in there. And then it goes down even further, and we have an H4. So each of these sections now is a subsection inside, and there is some information in there. So I think that's actually appropriate that this, our H3 is mountains, our H4 is each of the different mountains with a little bit of information about each one. We can skip down here. We don't need to go through all of those. And it's a little bit hidden, but we have another section about our exclusive tour. We have a not ready to travel to Venus yet. Then you can join our newsletter, and then we finally have our credits section toward the bottom of the page. So the heading structure on this one actually looks pretty good. Let's go check the Mercury site really quick. So let me check headings here. So right away, I see that we have a good thing. We have an H1 at the top of the page. So that's great. We actually have that on this page. And then let's see, we have a section called Mercury Travel Packages with a few subsections under it. Let me just click that to go there. So I think that's good. That's appropriate. So we have this section called Mercury Travel Packages, and we have 3 packages. And I think those are legitimate sections because we have a good amount of information actually in each one. Then we have the Mercury Experience as our next section, and we have some subheadings here. I think that's appropriate because we do have some extra content under each of those. Unlike the Venus site where we didn't have any extra content, we just had the names. So here we have a grid where we actually do have some more content in there. So I think that that's probably good. And then we can see that if we go to the traveler testimonials, it's flagging for us that we have a skipped level. So we have the traveler testimonials as an H2, correctly marking up a section of the page. But then the testimonials have H4s for who the testimonial came from. And those should be H3s. You don't want to skip levels in your heading hierarchy. So we would need to get that fixed and mark each of those up as H3s. Now, again, you can style them with CSS to look exactly the same as they do now. That's perfectly fine. Because we're not using the heading tags just for styles. We're not using them just for how they look. We're using them to actually give meaning to the outline of our document and explain how the different parts of content on the page are related to one another. All right. Then we have a frequently asked questions section. We have a ready for a journey of a lifetime. It certainly would be if you went off to Mercury, a journey of a lifetime. And then we have a section called Contact Us, which is a nice little section down here. And then I noticed that we have another skipped heading level where this headquarters goes straight to an H4. And so we skipped over the H3s. So we would want to update these here, the headquarters contact and email, to be H3s instead. And then let's see. We also weirdly have the footer is the way that this is set up. The footer is part of the contact us as section, which seems inappropriate, right? This should probably be a new section. So that should probably be an H2 to tell us that we're starting a new section of the page. And then it does have these as H4s under that, and then there's even an H5. But I think those should all be bumped up one heading level because that should be that should all be nested correctly. All right. And then it's going to show us a little bit about like what are we looking for? How do we know that these headings are okay? And it's links off to learn more about them. All right, so that is our heading test. Let's take a look at color contrast. So color contrast is where we have high hopes for automated checkers to check our page. And they can check many, many, many cases for us, but they also fail under a lot of different circumstances that are pretty common on websites. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So color contrast is going to tell us what that is. So it's just ensuring that there is sufficient contrast between the foreground and the background color. And we have two examples here. If you're able to see those, you'll see that the one on the right has white text on a dark blue background and it stands out. It's pretty easy to see. We have like a medium blue with white text in the top header section. And the one on the left, we have a brighter, lighter blue with white text on it. Depending on your eyesight, that might look okay, but it's actually not sufficient contrast according to the WCAG requirements. And then we have some, I don't know, is that like an ugly greenish yellow color that's on a very dark blue that is not sufficient contrast, right? It's much harder to see the text on the left than the text on the right. So it's going to tell us why that's important, and we can use this bookmarklet to change the page to grayscale. So that's pretty fun. And that's going to give us an easy way to kind of scan down through the page and check to see if there is sufficient color contrast. There are 3 different WCAG success criteria that deal with color contrast. So 1.4.3 is our AA, right? If you're trying to get to WCAG AA compliance. If you're trying to get to AAA, it would be this 1.4.6. So these are very similar. They just have different levels. The AAA rule requires more contrast than the AA rule. And then this one is a AA rule for non-text contrast. So this requires us to have things like buttons and form fields and icons have sufficient contrast with the background that they're on. So you can't have, a pale yellow icon sitting on a white background. That's not enough contrast for anybody to see. So this flip, let me go ahead and save this bookmarklet and we'll try it out on a couple of the other pages. But the flip to grayscale is kind of a handy shortcut, but you would want to manually check anything that looked like it was anywhere near close to failing manually. So just checking it with the, just flipping it to grayscale is not a sufficient check to just say, oh, well, I flipped it to grayscale and I could still read it. That's not going to be quite sufficient, but it is a handy little shortcut. So you can see here, this 25% off seems like it kind of blends into the background a little too much maybe. So that's something that we would want to check a little more closely. And I'll show you a tool in a second for doing that. Please scroll down the page. Most of this text stands out really well. I don't really see any problems. Any other potential problems? Let's check the Mercury site real quick. Let's convert that to grayscale and take a look. All right, all of this text seems to be pretty visible, pretty clear. I don't see any immediate problems, and I think that highlights an issue with relying on this conversion to grayscale, because there are definitely issues on this page. For example, this best value that is on a yellow background color is not sufficient contrast. And I think this version of this Discover Venus site has many of the accessibility issues corrected. There is another version of it that has a pale yellow instead of this kind of brownish color for the headings. So what we would want to do, let's see, where's my, did we somehow get my browser add-ons uninstalled? That's a good question. Okay, so we want this one, web developer browser add-on. I had it installed. I'm not sure how it got uninstalled. So that's very odd. Okay. So now we have that available. All right, let's go back over here and refresh the page. I still don't see it there. Oh, it's here, under here. So, oh, I'm doing color contrast. Okay, this tool is going to help us with a few other tests, but I actually want a color contrast checker. So let's, which I also had installed in Firefox. And let's see, let's try, I want a sampler. Let's see. I actually want like a color picker. All right, let's try this one. All right, and we'll come back over here and color picker. Whoa, what is this doing? That's not what I wanted. Let me try refreshing this page here. Maybe this isn't the right extension. Yeah, this looks, well, maybe that is going to work. Sorry, let me try this one more time. It looks like I can, I want to be able to use a little eyedropper to pick colors off the page. And I don't know what happens when I pick that, but it doesn't seem to let me do it. All right, let's try one more time here. What was the one I had before? Maybe it was this one? Well, let's try it. Okay, I'll refresh the page. And let's try that one. Well, that doesn't seem to be doing anything. Oh, interesting. So if I click that, for example, oh, okay, I see it's going to tell me the foreground and background color, but it gives them to me as RGB. Oh, well, that's unfortunate. Okay, well, there are many, many color pickers that you can get. I don't know why I'm having such bad luck finding the one that I previously had on here that I really, really liked. All right, I'm going to get rid of these two. It just gave me like a little eyedropper, and I could just pick any color from the web page. Can I? Okay, I can pin that to the toolbar so I can always see it. All right, let's try one more time. Third time's a charm, right? Let's try color picker. Okay, we didn't try this one yet. Let's see. It's not monitored by security, but I'm not too concerned about a color picker doing something nefarious. All right, let's try that one. And it cannot read this page. Let's see. Well, I think I picked 3 duds. That's unfortunate. And I just cannot on this site. Let's see. Does it work on this one? No. It is enabled. Some sort of doesn't require any permissions. Oh, I don't think that's true. Okay, well, you can get color picker plugins that are usually not so hard to find. And it'll give you like a little eyedropper. You can eyedrop pick the text color and the background color. And then if you go to, if you just check for color contrast checker, there are many, 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 many of them. Some of them are very pretty and nicely designed. Others are very utilitarian, like this one, where you would just put in your foreground and your background color, and it will return to you and tell you your contrast ratio. And then it actually tells you down here for normal text, which normal text is 18 points or smaller, and regular weight. And it'll tell you if that passes the AA, which is 1.4.3, or AAA 1.4.6. For large text, which is 18 points or bigger. Let's see, am I remembering that all correctly? Is it on here somewhere? 14 points. Large text is 14 points and bold or larger, or 18 points or larger. So if it's bold, it only needs to be 14 points. If it's not bold, it needs to be 18 points to be considered large text. And so there is a different requirement. Large text has a lower threshold. So if I start making this, if I start making that color lighter, you'll see that it'll still pass at AA for this text here, but it fails for normal size text. And then this tells me the 1.4.11, I think it is, for non-text contrast. This tells me, right, for form inputs, my border around a form input, or my my icon, for example, if that has sufficient contrast. So if you can select the colors, sorry, for next time, I'm not sure I had those browser extensions installed in my Firefox, and I have absolutely no idea how they went missing. It hasn't been that long since I used them. So I'll make sure that I have them for next time and have a nice one that works that we can actually take a look at. All right, let's see. We've got about 10 minutes left, about 13 minutes left. So I think I will leave off on doing the manual WCAG Easy Checks. So we got through the first 4 of them, and you can see there's quite a few more. I can pick up next time and start going through the rest of those. And I did want to talk a little bit today about the WCAG evaluation methodology. So if you find yourself where you do want to conduct a full accessibility audit of a website or a web application, this methodology will actually be nice and helpful for walking you through how to do that. And we come on over here to, oh, that's not the one I wanted. There is a nice tool that will actually kind of walk you through this step by step by step. It is filling out a lot of information, but it will let you create your report and report all of your issues and plan out all of your testing. And this is available on the website just for free. And you can see that we've got some tips for how to use it, about this tool and how it works, explanation that are here. And it'll walk you through from the very beginning, like how to plan out a full accessibility audit and then execute it. So you can see that first it's going to have us define the scope. So we have the website name, we have the scope of the website, and if we open that up, it will tell us, are we looking at all web content? Are we looking at a mobile version? Are we looking at a mobile application? Like, what exactly is the scope that we're looking at? Which version of WCAG are we testing? So this particular tool, because it is provided by the WAI, is for evaluating WCAG. So if you need to test for Section 508, right, there is a separate testing method and a separate evaluation method that is available from the Department of Homeland Security. I'm not sure why it is DHS that offers that, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But they do have a separate methodology, and there's actually a whole course that you can sign up for and get a certification to be a Section 508 trusted tester. So there is a separate methodology for testing for that. And if you need to comply to other legal guidelines around the world, they will all hopefully right, provide you with like a testing methodology for how you are supposed to test against that that standard, and make sure that a website either passes or doesn't, or where it falls short. So here we would choose which version of WCAG we were testing against. Again, WCAG is our only choice here. And if we want to test at AAA or AAA, we have our accessibility support baseline, which is where we're going to say, we want to make sure that this application works with these technologies. So ideally, right, we would make sure that it worked with everything, but there's only so much time in the world, and we can't test with absolutely everything in the world. So we would want to define, here are the things that we are actually going to test with. And you can see that they give you an example that you're going to test Internet Explorer, which tells you that this is a little bit out of date because it would be Edge at this point. With JAWS, I'm going to test Firefox with the NVDA screen reader, and I'm going to test Apple, which I'm not even sure what that means because I'm pretty sure their browser has always been called Safari, with a voiceover, right? And you would spell that out here, exactly which browsers and which assistive technologies. Are you going to use a mobile phone? Are you going to test, am I going to test this website using TalkBack on an Android phone? Am I going to test it using VoiceOver on a iPhone? You will find that VoiceOver on an iPhone different from VoiceOver on a desktop, right, on a Mac laptop, for example. So you'll get different results. So you have to figure out, like, with the timeline that I have available to me and the budget that I have available to me, like, where is my time best spent, and ensuring that I have as much test coverage as I can. So to figure out which of these technologies am I going to be using during my testing. And then if I have any kind of requirements for my test, then I would list them all out here. So exploring the target website. So this is kind of, I think this is the fun and interesting part, where we're figuring out, like, how is this website put together? How does it work? So I'm going to figure out, like, which technologies is this website using? Maybe this form isn't quite good enough for you because maybe you do want to specifically call out, if it's a single page app written in something like a Vue or Ember or React, like, maybe you want to call that out separately. But we want to figure out, well, actually, this is flexible enough that I could add that in down here as well. So, like, what technologies are we relying on this website? Because that's going to give me an idea of what kind of tests I need to run. For example, if there's no SVGs, or there's no PDFs, or maybe there's no JavaScript at all, right? Then I don't have to run tests against those things because they're not in use on this site. And so that has eliminated a whole batch of the possible tests that need to be run. I don't need to run them because maybe that's not in use on this particular website. This also gives me a place where I can think through the essential functionality of the website. So is it just an informational website where somebody's just going to come and they're just going to click around and read things, and there's no actual interactivity? Or is it a highly interactive website where maybe it's an application that somebody is coming and they're using it to create reports, or they're using it to, I don't know, there's apps for everything, do something that a web application would do? Or is it an e-commerce site, right, where the essential functionality of the site would definitely be adding items to the cart and checking out and paying, and then getting my notifications that the item has shipped and knowing what the status of my order is? So just thinking through, like, the specific website or web application that I'm going to be testing, what is all the essential functionality of that site or application, so that I know those are things that I need to make sure that I'm testing. And then also to start thinking through the variety of different page types. So for example, if it's an e-commerce store, and I have 1,000 products in my store, Well, a product page is going to be one page type that's on there, right? And my site is going to have 1,000 of them because I have 1,000 products. When I am conducting a manual accessibility audit, do I need to test all 1,000 of those product pages? So on one hand, you would argue, well, yes, because there could be an issue in the content, right? Like the person entering the description of the item might have used headings out of order in the description, or they may have not added alt text onto the product images. And that's true, but generally those are things that could be caught by automated testing. And it's not super realistic to think that you're going to have enough time to conduct full testing on 1,000 different product pages. There's also just a diminishing return from doing that because they're all using the same template. And an issue that happens on one of them, like if there's an issue in the template where there's not an H1 on the page, for example, that's going to happen on all 1,000 pages. And there's not a lot of benefit to logging that issue 1,000 times. You just need to log it once. And if you fix it once on the template, it's fixed on all 1,000 pages. So that's where we head to next, is actually figuring out like, what is the sample that we need to pick from this website in order to make sure that we are covering all of the basic functionality, but we're also not stuck spending 6 months, right, testing manually 1,000 different product pages that are all basically the same. So this will walk us through figuring out what that representative sample is. And so we have here, again, the essential functionality and the variety of page types. And we can add our randomly selected sample and a structured sample. So the structured sample is, we're going to say, okay, this is an e-commerce site. So for sure, I want to make sure the home page works. Almost always. I can hardly think of an example where you wouldn't have a home page included in an audit. I guess only if you were specifically auditing for a certain functionality or a certain section of the site. Right, but if we're just talking about a website or a web application in general, the home page is always going to be included. We would also want to make sure that we had some product pages in there. We would also want to make sure that we have that cart page, so everybody would be able to access the cart page, understand what's in their cart, remove items from cart, change the quantity in their cart, all of those kinds of things that happen, that then we would be able to proceed to checkout. So we'd want to make sure that we have the checkout screen included in our testing, right? So thinking through the essential functionality of the website, what are those important pages that we're going to include in the testing, because we are hand-picking those as important pages that we want to make sure that testing gets done. And that is our structured web sample. On top of that, we're going to do a randomly selected sample. And that is where we go to our page types. And you can see that there is a requirement for WCAG EN to be 10%. So out of our 1,000 products, we're going to manually test 100 of them to make sure that we are covering any potential issues that might show up there. So we do our structured sample, and then we do a randomly selected sample of the different page types. If it's a blog, right, you might pick 10% of the blog posts. What are some other samples? If it's a site about movies, for example, you have a movie page, right, you would want to test out 10% of the movie pages that were on the site to be included in the testing. And that is our randomly selected sample. All right, and then we're going to start auditing. So the rest of this tool actually walks you through how to audit each of the different success criteria. So you can see we're going to start with the first page, and we're just going to go down through each of these tests, and we're going to tell if it passed, failed. I can't tell for whatever reason. This doesn't apply. So for example, this 1.2.1 deals with audio only and video only content. If there's none of that on the page, then I could just say not present and I'm done. I don't have to do anything further. Otherwise, I would want to run the tests that I need to figure out if this passes or fails. And this is going to describe to me what it's all about. And I figure it out, and then I can put my outcome in here. Did it pass? Is everything okay? Did it fail because there's something wrong? And then if that is the case, then I would want to put my observations in here. I'd want to record some details around what was wrong so that when somebody came along later to fix those issues, they understand what they are. If I can't tell for whatever reason, again, I would want to put some observations in here, like why can't I tell what's going on the page, that I can't tell if this passes or not. Again, not present or not checked. So they're all going to be not checked by default because we haven't run the test yet. And you'll do that. You step through this list for every single page that you're testing. And this tool will accumulate a report for you at the end that you can then download. So that is available on the website. It is for free. It's just open for anybody to use. And I think it's really helpful to walk through these steps at the beginning for defining the scope, exploring the website, and selecting your sample. I think it walks you through some really helpful steps for figuring out the scope of the test, what technology you're going to be testing, etc. It is really helpful, I think, for kind of getting your head around an audit and figuring out what you're going to test and what all needs to be involved. For the rest of it, you could use this form or not use this form, right? If you have another tool that you prefer to record your issues in, by all means, like go and use that tool. And maybe you have your own checklist, right, that you're working off of that covers all of the different WCAG success criteria. It does get a little bit tedious to fill this all in here. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, you could also use Aardvark to do that testing. So you could use Aardvark to do your manual testing and record all of your issues directly in the Aardvark interface. So that is an option that's available to you. So this was a good introduction to just beginning to use manual testing with accessibility testing. So if you weren't sure what that meant before, I do definitely recommend coming over here to the WCAG Easy Checks and checking those out. It does kind of walk you through a handful of really helpful tests, kind of step by step. And the new version of the document gives you a nice bookmarklet for each different success criteria that it has you do here. So each little test has its own little bookmarklet, so you can have those all saved in your browser and use them on any website that you want to run those quick checks. It's a really nice introduction, and it's really nice to get into the habit, if you're a developer, to get into the habit of running through these quick checks before you submit your code, right? Before you commit code, run through these checks, make sure that it passes all of them, and make sure that everything is looking good and that you don't have any issues. It's not comprehensive, right? It's not testing every single WCAG success criteria, but it is going to catch a lot of the most common issues that we see across the web. And it is a really good way to get started on your accessibility path. So next time, I think I will pick up with doing, we'll start with a skip link. I will get a color contrast picker, a color picker that actually works. Installed in my Firefox, so we'll have that available, and we'll take a look at that, and we will. So maybe I'll just touch on color contrast a little bit more, and we'll keep working our way down this list a little bit more and take a look at how to do these different accessibility tests. So like I said, if you run into any issues, just leave a comment on this video. I'll do my best to come through and answer those. And otherwise, I'll see you in about 2 weeks for the next live stream. Thank you so much for joining me today.